The lights flickered again in the Irias 3 Colony Command Center, casting long, quivering shadows across the metallic walls. Governor Alrin Dorr stood hunched over the central table, 3 fingers gripping the edge with knuckles pale and stiff. His gray-blue Scolari skin glistened faintly with sweat, the markings across his bald scalp darkening in worry. In the low hum of emergency power, his voice cut through the tension not loud, but with a presence that held every ear. "Status," he said, not lifting his gaze from the tactical map. It glowed red, bleeding across the edges like a wound that would not close. Rin Tavos, a lanky prairie with ash-colored scales and 2 young eyes, looked up from his console. "Shields are down to 12%. Outer sectors are gone. We've lost sectors 3 through 9. I'm trying to send a broad wave through the deep bands, but the jamming net's adapting faster than we can recalibrate." Alrin nodded, not in acceptance, but in understanding. "Keep trying. Use harmonics from the old mining towers. Piggyback off power spikes, anything." "I'll try, sir," Rin said softly, fingers trembling over glowing keys dot in the far corner, barely visible in the dim red of auxiliary lights. Lyra sat on the cold floor of the CUM substation. She clutched an old data recorder between slender fingers. Her skin was lavender pale, marked with faint Ilari tribal dots, though half of them were smudged with ash and dirt. Her eyes were wide, not with panic, but something deeper, a mix of grief and hope hanging by a thread. She spoke softly into the recorder, her voice quivering but steady. "Hi, Mama, it's me. I don't know if this will ever reach you, but I wanted to say I'm okay. At least, I think I'm okay. There's lots of noise, and we had to leave school early. Mr. Knoll said we had to go underground, but they wouldn't let us take our toys or anything, just a blanket and food. I saw the sky turn orange, Mama. It used to be blue, remember? I tried to remember that." She paused, swallowing, then wiped her cheek with the sleeve of her tattered sweater. "They said the Federation might come. But Mr. Rin said the stars are too quiet now. I hope you're safe. I hope ... someone's coming." Her voice cracked, and she clicked the recorder off, curling into herself. No tears came. There was nothing left to cry. Above them, the orbital sensors buzzed. Rin stiffened. Governor, multiple Zarketh signatures. 6 more cruisers entering low orbit. They're sealing the exit corridors. "That's it then," Alrin whispered. He turned toward the window, though it now only showed fire reflected off. Blackened glass. Irias 3, the moon once known for its twin-ring sunsets and crystal ridgelines, had become a burning graveyard. He faced his command crew, only a dozen left now. Most were engineers or analysts. None were soldiers. They had volunteered to stay even when evacuation shuttles had launched 2 days prior, knowing those ships were decoys meant to buy time. "Begin sealing the bunkers," he said, one of the officers. Choked. "Governor, we still have hundreds outside." "Seal them," Alrin repeated. "We delay even one breach, we give the children another hour. That's worth everything." He looked at Rin, and for a moment the governor's old strength returned, not the steel of command, but the fire of defiance. "We're not dying in silence. Rin, I don't care if that message hits a brick wall of static and rust. You keep sending it. Bounce it off broken satellites, throw it into solar wind if you have to. Someone will hear us." Rin met his gaze and nodded, voice trembling. "Yes, sir." In the CUM substation, Lyra clicked her recorder back on. Her eyes flickered toward the ceiling as distant thunder echoed through the walls. "And Mama ... I just wanted you to know. I'm not afraid anymore. Someone's coming. I believe that." Now, her fingers tightened around the recorder. Outside, the sky cracked open with light. The ground trembled beneath Colonel Yura-san's boots as the blast doors behind her sealed shut with a hiss of escaping pressure. The deep rumble that followed came not from the quakes of the moon's crust, but from the Zarketh Dominion's orbital cannons beginning their next precision strike. She exhaled slowly, steam curling from her lips into the icy corridor of the mining station sublevel. The warmth of breath was the only human thing left in this part of the moon. She wiped blood from her brow, not hers, and keyed her shoulder. "Come, Team Oryx, report in." "Any survivors from the power station breach?" Static answered first. Then a voice crackled through, breathless, strained. "3 of us made it, Colonel. Heavy casualties. Zarketh used breaching gas. People were clawing their own helmets off." Yura clenched her jaw until her tusks ached. "Get underground. Fall back to shelter node Theta. There's no holding them in the open." The voice cut off before acknowledging, replaced by distant echoes of movement. She didn't need confirmation. The Dominion was pushing harder now, closer. Irias 3's defenses had never been designed for war. The colony was founded for peace, for energy harvesting, for commerce. The guards were ex-miners. The weapons were converted drills, and the walls were meant to keep out rock slides, not Zarketh assault squads. A light flickered at the edge of her tactical display. "New orbital insertions," she muttered. Her HUD confirmed it. 29 pods descending on the colony's western ridge drop capsules, sleek, black, and fast. Inside each one, a kill team. They weren't just taking territory. They were surrounding them, choking them, preparing the final crush. A klaxon howled overhead, and then came the voice of Governor Alrindor, sharp and measured even through the distortion. "All outer units, fall back to interior checkpoints. Bunker. Seals will close in 30 minutes. If you can't reach a door by then, dig in and wait for a miracle." Miracle? Yura almost laughed. Her people didn't believe in them anymore. From the shadows behind her, a group of wounded civilians stumbled forward, led by an old maintenance droid dragging a broken supply sled. Among them were 2 children, their pale skin flushed with fear, one of them still clinging to a cracked toy starfighter. She knelt quickly, putting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Kevi," he whispered. "You're going to make it to the shelter. Kevi, just stay close to the bot and don't look back." The boy didn't speak, but his eyes locked on hers like iron to magnet. She stood again, motioned. The group onward and turned back to the open corridor. The air smelled of metal, soot, and blood. Far above, the sky rumbled with another bombardment. Pieces of Irias 3 were being carved away. And still, no sign of help. Yura moved through the ruins of Sector 12. What had once been a public plaza with food stalls and market lights, now it was a graveyard of steel and shattered neon signs. She ducked behind a collapsed scaffolding and pulled out her field transceiver. Rin Tavos's voice crackled on the other end. "This is San. Update. Still transmitting. I've split the signal across 5 harmonics using phase timing and piggybacked them off the local geological pulses. Does that mean it's getting through? Maybe, maybe not. But if someone's out there listening, they'll hear something." She looked up toward the sky, black and bruised with smoke. How much longer until the shield net collapses? 2 hours max. Less if they hit the energy pylons again. And comes? They're jamming harder. I'm throwing ghosts at them, but they're tightening the noose. It's only a matter of time. She lowered the device and took a long breath. You ever wonder why the Federation stopped building warships that could answer calls like this? Sometimes, Rin said, but then I remember we stopped needing them. Until now. Until now, she echoed. Without warning, a nearby ventilation stack exploded in a thunderous blast. The shockwave flung her backward into rubble, her vision blurred. Ears rang. Dust filled her mouth. Then came the slow click of armored feet. Zarketh. Infantry. Their black armor shimmered in the rising heat, eyes glowing red behind biomasks. One moved in her direction, weapon raised. She rolled to her side, grabbing a discarded mining cutter. The power cells sputtered, barely charged. One shot, maybe two. She took aim, breath steady, finger tensed. The Zarketh soldier paused. Then a low boom echoed through the sky. Not from the colony. Not from the Zarketh. It was deeper, sharper, alien to this battlefield. The enemy paused, confused. Yura's come buzzed to life. Rin's voice, breathless. Something just pierced the jamming net. You're not gonna believe this. What? She rasped. A signal just came through. Human signature. It's from deep space. And it's moving fast. The sky above them flickered, and every sensor across Iria's 3 spiked red. Yura looked up. And for the first time in 6 days she smiled. The void between stars was quiet in a way that could crush weaker souls. It wasn't the kind of silence one found in a peaceful room, but the kind that gnawed at your bones, the kind that whispered reminders of just how small you were in the cosmos. Out here sound didn't travel. Screams vanished. Heroes died without last words. And ships drifted until their names were lost in the dark. But not this one. The UN Howlstorm surged through uncharted hyperspace, wrapped in distortions. So unstable most navigators called it suicide. The hull groaned under the strain, as if the ship itself knew it wasn't supposed to be here. Systems flickered. Internal gravity twitched. Hull plates screeched against the compression of space-time. But still it held. On the bridge, under dim red lighting, Captain Mara Vance sat like a statue carved from iron. Her eyes, a fierce hazel gone gold in the low light, didn't blink as she stared at the fluctuating navcore display. Her fingers tapped against the armrest, slow and steady counting. Not seconds. Calculations. Possibilities. They had no margin for error. One misstep and the Howlstorm would fracture into nothing. Stabilizer coils are holding, said Orion. The ship's AI, its voice smooth and calm but undercut with warning tones. But we are exceeding safe dimensional variance. At current velocity, probability of core destabilization is now 43%. Keep us on this course, Vance said flatly. A pause. Captain, I must respectfully remind you that this route was untested for vessels above corvette class. We are risking. I'm not risking. I've already decided. She turned slightly. They're dying down there. I'm not arriving late. On the display beside her, the partial decryption of the Iria's 3 distress signal scrolled in and out of legibility. Most of it was static, a chopped-up storm of radiation damage and jamming interference. But every few minutes, one clean phrase repeated itself in that raw, broken voice. ... Please, anyone. We need help? And then, they're killing innocent people. Vance had heard thousands of distress calls in her career. Some were clever traps. Some were decoys. This one wasn't either. This one had tears in it. Across the bridge, Commander Seth Albrecht stood with arms crossed. His cybernetic left eye tracked power surges across multiple stations. He was tall, rigid, and ran his command modules with brutal efficiency. He'd followed Vance into exile after the Shatterfront scandal, where she defied Federation retreat orders to evacuate 3,000 civilians while her fleet was torn apart. You know they'll court-martial us again, Albrecht said, not looking at her. Vance cracked a wry smile. They'll have to find us first. Below decks, Engineer Torin Halle braced himself against a vibrating conduit, his hands wrapped in glowing red tools as he recalibrated the heat sinks. Sweat poured down his back as plasma hissed through coolant tubes overhead. The Howlstorms. Engines weren't designed for prolonged hyperskip. It was like stretching muscle until the tendons snapped. But Halle pushed harder. "If I burn out these regulators," he warned through comms, "we won't just fall out of hyperspace, we'll be scattered across subspace like confetti at a funeral. Then keep the pieces big enough to bury." Vance replied. In the cargo bay, Flight Lieutenant Rika Tran prepped the drop fighters. Her voice barked out across the hangar, fierce and fast. "Check your sealants twice. I don't care if you flew through the Hellion Run blindfolded, we're about to drop into a slaughterhouse. No one plays hero alone. You fly, you cover, you survive." Every pilot on board was a volunteer. Most had nowhere else to go. Some had lost families to the Zarketh in earlier campaigns. Others were ghosts like the Howlstorm itself, forgotten, left behind, presumed dead. They weren't flying for medals. They were flying for revenge. Up on the bridge again, Orion's voice shifted slightly. "Captain, the jamming net over Irias 3 is beginning to fluctuate. I believe our proximity is affecting its pulse structure." "You mean they felt us coming?" "I mean they don't know what is coming." "Good." Vance stood slowly. "Bring us out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Battle ready. Red protocol." Red protocol engaged. The lights dimmed across the ship. Sirens howled. Weapons powered online. Missile bays unlocked. Railguns charged with magnetic shrieks. On every deck, across every console, red symbols bloomed like blood. And then the Howlstorm howled. Hyperspace split. Reality buckled. And the galaxy blinked as something massive, ancient and very, very angry, tore its way back into known space. At the edge of the Irias 3 system, Zarketh patrol ships scrambled as their sensors spasmed. Alarms blared as the Howlstorm appeared like a thunderclap, 2 kilometers of dark steel, scarred from wars long past, gliding like a predator into their midst. On the moon below, amid blood and rubble, civilians and soldiers alike looked up into the burning sky. And for the first time since the siege began, they saw hope arrive with teeth. In the brief seconds after the Howlstorm clawed its way into normal space, time seemed to hesitate. The vessel drifted like a specter born from black holes, its burn-scarred hull gleaming under Irias 3's pale twin moons. For a moment, the entire system seemed stunned, as if the stars themselves had forgotten what it meant for humanity to arrive angry. On the Zarketh flagship Calvor, the silence shattered as sensor sirens wailed. Admiral Krathos Zuan, a towering reptilian brute clad in obsidian command armor, stood frozen, his scaled tail twitching with unease. "What is that?" he hissed. His underling, a thin-boned technician, choked on his reply. "Unregistered warcraft, human make, signal tags. Match a vessel presumed lost 2 cycles ago. Impossible." The Howlstorm was destroyed at Rezek's maw. Zuan stepped forward, yellow eyes narrowing. "Then explain why it now stares." "Down my fleet." The Howlstorm didn't speak, not at first. It simply floated between the Dominion fleet and Irias 3 like a judgment passed in steel. Its presence was not grand, it was grim. No ceremonial flags, no call for parley, no posturing. Just the steady click of targeting sensors locking onto 23 enemy warships. On the bridge of the human vessel, Captain Mara Vance stood amidst a flurry of red warning lights. Her voice was a whip crack through the air. "Orion, bring up the fleet schematic." The display blinked to life, outlining the entire Zarketh battle group. The enemy ships formed a noose around Irias 3, with heavy cruisers on the flanks and 3 artillery platforms preparing to launch seismic warheads at the colony's subsurface shelters. "They're choking the moon," Commander Albrecht muttered. "And those seismic missiles will bring the shelters down like tombs." Vance's voice was low, but sharp. "Then we cut the noose." "Orders?" "Red protocol still active. You know what that means." Every station snapped into motion. Across the ship, engineers rerouted energy from auxiliary systems to kinetic weapons. Deep in the engine core, Torrin Howley bypassed safety protocols that had been put in place for a reason, watching coolant levels drop to critical as reactor temperature climbed past safe limits. This ship won't survive a long engagement. He warned. It doesn't have to, Vance said. It just has to win. Back on the moon's surface, in the cracked remains of Command Sector Theta, Colonel Urasan shielded her eyes as the air shimmered with heat. The comm system, long dead to external signals, sparked to life. A voice came through. "This is Captain Mara Vance of the Howlstorm. Dominion fleet, withdraw immediately or face extermination. This is your only warning." Yura blinked. She looked to Rin Tavos beside her, stunned. "Is that real?" Rin laughed as. He threw a fist into the air. They came. By the stars they came. Above them, the Zarketh made their decision. They answered the warning with a full barrage. From orbit, a swarm of plasma missiles and kinetic lances screamed toward the Howlstorm. From three sides, ships charged in coordinated patterns. A death spiral. And yet the Howlstorm didn't retreat. It accelerated. The human warship moved with the Predator's grace, its AI-controlled railguns unleashing a synchronized curtain of destruction. Plasma fire sizzled against advanced countermeasures. Interceptor drones burst from side bays, intercepting inbound warheads with brutal precision. Inside the bridge, the deck rumbled. Albrecht shouted, "They're trying to pin us from three angles." Vance's eyes didn't move from the tactical display. "Let them try. Orion force vector pivot. Dive between them. Tactical AI takes control of secondary weapons. Rika, deploy your wings." In the fighter bay, Flight Lieutenant Rika Tran roared into her helmet mic. "All squads launch. Cover our queen." The launch bays snapped open like jaws. Sleek fighter craft poured out like hornets, screaming toward enemy flanks. What the Zarketh didn't expect was their behavior human. Pilots didn't fight in formations. They flowed, darted, vanished, and reappeared, each one adapting on instinct. Chaos, fire, precision. Above Irias 3, the Howlstorm punched straight through the central wedge of the Dominion fleet. Enemy ships exploded behind her. Fire rolled across. The stars. Albrecht blinked at the display. "We just took out two cruisers. They can't adapt to us." "They weren't built to fight humans," Vance replied. "They were built to subjugate. That's their mistake." The Dominion fleet began to fracture. Without Admiral Zuin's expected instant victory, smaller commanders made reckless moves. Some tried to retreat. Others fired blind. But the Howlstorm was already inside the formation, turning them against themselves. Then Orion spoke. "Captain, I have visual on the seismic missile platforms. Firing sequence initiated. 3 minutes until surface impact. Get me firing solution." "Acquiring?" "Locked. Do it." The forward-mounted energy lances on the Howlstorm ignited. A column of white light roared into space, slicing through void like a spear made of starlight. The first seismic platform detonated in a radiant burst. Seconds later, 2 more shots. Followed 3 direct hits. 3 dead platforms. Yerra, watching from the ground, fell to her knees. They were going to bury us alive. Rin whispered, "Not anymore." On the Dominion command ship, Admiral Zuin bellowed, "Fall back, break engagement." But it was too late. The human warship had already split his formation. Drones were picking apart his engines. The sky above. The moon burned not with death, but with rescue. And through it all, the Howlstorm didn't stop. It chased, it punished. It avenged. Captain Vance stood still in the chaos, hands folded behind her back. as if she were watching a storm she had unleashed. "Let the galaxy remember," she said quietly. "We may arrive late," she turned, eyes cold, "but when we do, we don't leave survivors." The sky over Irias 3 was no longer just aflame, it was screaming. From the shattered rooftops of the colony's central district, civilians and soldiers watched in stunned silence as the darkness above boiled with fire. Zarketh warships, once immovable giants in orbit, now erupted like dying stars. Trails of smoke and flame etched the heavens as burning hulls collapsed inward or fell from orbit, glowing like meteors that never belonged. For 6 days, the people of Irias 3 had huddled beneath that sky, certain no one would come. For 6 days, they listened to distant detonations and closer screams, wondering which sound would mark their end. Now, they were listening to something else, the sound of vengeance. Colonel Urasan ducked behind a broken bulkhead as another orbital blast scorched the mountains beyond. The air shimmered with static from collapsing Dominion relays. Around her, children cried not from fear, but from the shock of survival. It didn't feel real. Hope never came this fast. Or this hard. Her crackled. "Colonel, Rin?" Tavos said from the underground broadcast room. "Are you seeing this?" Yura looked up, squinting through the firelight. "I see a warship that fights like it remembers what justice means." From orbit, the Howlstorm dove again. Inside the ship, the bridge was chaos and control systems sparking, alarms flashing, yet every motion precise. Captain Mara Vance stood like a war priestess at her altar, surrounded by operators shouting. Telemetry and damage reports. Sweat glistened on her neck. Her left hand gripped the rail beside her command chair. Her right? It hovered near the weapons manual override. "Target status?" she demanded. Commander Albrecht wiped blood from a cut on his temple. 5 cruisers down, 2 more limping. 8 remaining and regrouping. Let them. Give them hope. Then, rip it away. "Vance," he leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Hull integrity at 47%. Starboard coil array is leaking plasma. If they focus fire, they won't get the chance." She turned to the forward console. "Orion?" "Yes, Captain." "Protocol, Fenrir." The AI's voice went cold. "Are you certain?" "Execute." Across. The Howlstorm warning lights turned white, unheard of. Crew members froze, their hearts skipping. Fenrir wasn't just a battle routine. It was a suicide maneuver, a move designed not to survive, but to destroy. Redirect all power from non-essential systems, Vance ordered. Coolant overrides to aft cannons. Lock our vector along the enemy formation's heart. Hawley, in engineering, shouted into the comms. "You're overclocking the core. I can't guarantee it holds." Vance responded calmly, "Then give it a reason to." Outside, the Dominion fleet surged forward. Zarketh formations closed ranks, swarming to cut off the human ship's escape corridor. Red targeting lances crisscrossed the void. The Howlstorm didn't turn. It charged. Aboard the Zarketh dreadnought Malkazar, Admiral Zuon watched in disbelief. "What are they doing?" "They're charging into the center of the formation." "That's madness." His weapons officer shrieked, "Sir, they're venting engine plasma and aligning toward us." Then came Orion's voice, bleeding across all. "Dominion frequencies. Attention, Zarketh Dominion. You have violated Galactic Accord 314 by initiating unprovoked hostilities against a protected colony. You have engaged in war crimes against civilians. Per United Earth Command Directive 001. This is your judgment." From the belly of the Howlstorm, the main fusion core split open and the Fenrir Lance fired. A beam of hyper-compressed stellar energy tore through the center of the Zarketh fleet like a divine hammer. It didn't just burn, it shredded ships from within. Gravitational pulses warped armor. Systems failed before crews could scream. Explosions bloomed in frozen silence. 3 capital ships evaporated. One split in 2 and fell into Iris 3's gravity well, tearing a canyon into the side of a mountain. The Howlstorm, caught in its own blast recoil, spun violently, but the shields held. Barely. On the moon's surface, civilians stared upward, mouths open. One old miner whispered, "That's not a ship. That's a god in armor." Inside the cockpit of a diving fighter, Lieutenant Rika Tran whooped into her headset. They opened a damn hole through the fleet. All squadrons follow the beast. Human fighters streamed through the breach like vultures diving through a wound, chasing what remained of the enemy. Their weapons surgically targeted disabled engines and tore through weapons arrays. Where the Howlstorm shattered, the fighters finished. Back on the Dominion flagship, Zuon staggered from his command dais, clutching his side. Sparks rained from above. His bridge was burning. "How can one ship do this?" he rasped. A whisper came from his tactical officer, who sat slumped against the wall, smoke curling from his breathing tubes. "They don't fight for territory. They fight for the ones you made scream." In his final moment, Zuon understood something chilling. This wasn't vengeance. This was human memory made manifest. They remembered every colony that cried for help and died. Every treaty broken. Every child stolen. The Howlstorm was not a rescue ship. It was retribution. On the bridge, Vance steadied herself as gravity systems stabilized. Orion confirmed kill stats. 12 ships destroyed. 2 disabled. 4 retreating. No pursuit required. Albrecht blinked. No pursuit? They need to run. They need to remember. This wasn't a battle. It was a message. From below, Rin Tavos patched into the bridge feed. "Captain Vance, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to," she replied. "But I think the people need to see something." He switched feeds, and for the first time since the siege began, Vance saw it. Children playing again in the rubble. Mothers reuniting with lost sons. Old miners, digging graves not to hide but to honor. Hope. Not as a dream, but as a visible, breathing force. And then came Lyra's voice, live on every channel. "To the stars, thank you. If you're hearing this," they came. The humans came. Vance looked out at the dark horizon. "We're not finished," she murmured. "Not yet." She turned to Albrecht. "Get me medical dispatch. Search and rescue. Full spectrum. And us? We reload? We refuel." Her eyes burned. "And then we go where the next scream is." The crater where the Zarketh flagship had fallen still smoldered, molten rock hissing beneath clouds of chemical smoke. The side of the mountain had been ripped open, exposing crystal veins that once funded the colony's hopes for trade. Now, those same crystals glowed like the veins of a wounded god scarlet, cracked, bleeding heat. In the shadow of that devastation, the survivors of Iris 3 stood, silent, not because there was nothing left to say, but because the sky no longer screamed. Howlstorm hung above them in low orbit like a blade that hadn't finished falling. Its outer hull was warped and blackened, vents still steaming from the Fenrir protocol burn. One section of its dorsal plating had completely torn away, revealing molten scaffolding that pulsed dimly like a heartbeat. But the ship held. Despite every calculation that said it couldn't, it held. Inside the ship, gravity flickered in and out as internal systems rebooted. Hallways blinked with emergency strobes, and wounded crew members were pulled from collapsed corridors by medics with shaking hands. Down in engineering, Torin Hawley leaned over the core panel, fingers blackened from plasma discharge burns. He had routed raw fusion directly into the primary capacitors, something no shipwright would dare on a vessel this size. "Containment holding," he gasped. but we burned through 3 coolant reservoirs. We've got maybe 40 minutes of stable power left. Commander Seth Albrecht crouched beside him, handing over a nano-stitch injector. That's 40 more than I expected. I'll take a trophy, Holly muttered. A scar, something. I want everyone back home to know I stared down a collapsing. Corin said, not today. You'll get your scar, Albrecht replied. Now get some rest before you collapse into the coolant tank. But no one rested. Not yet dot above, on the battle-scarred bridge, Captain Mara Vance stood amid flickering displays, one hand braced against the nav console as tremors still rippled. Through the deck plating. Report, she rasped. Orion responded, voice slower than usual, patched through secondary modules. Weapon systems at 21%. Shield relays remain offline. Hull integrity below 40%. Engines functional at 33%. Long-range communications still jammed, but local bands restored. Damage assessment on the moon? Orion shifted tone. Surface-level destruction consistent with orbital engagement. Civilian losses appear minimized due to subterranean shelters. Colony command signals now visible. They're alive. Vance let out a breath that sounded more like a war cry silenced too soon. That's all that mattered. Then came a ping direct. Channel request. Source. Colony command. Authentication confirmed. Put it through. The central display fuzzed, then stabilized to show Governor Alrin Dorr, blood-streaked and dirt-covered, but alive. His eyes blinked against the light. Captain Vance. Governor. I don't have the words, he said quietly, but I'll find them. Eventually. You don't need to, Vance replied. You held the line longer than anyone could have. Asked. You came, Captain? His voice cracked. No one was supposed to come. Behind him, figures were gathering civilians, militia, survivors who had crawled out of broken buildings to see who had turned the sky into fire. Among them stood Lyra, eyes locked on the screen. She stepped forward and whispered, She's real. Her voice reached through the comms. You saved us, all of us. A pause. Then she added, We were so close to giving up. Vance didn't speak for several seconds. Then she leaned in and said softly, Next time you feel that way, remember this. The void listens. And sometimes the void howls back. Suddenly, an alert chimed medical emergency in Bay 4. Commander Grant to medical, Vance said without missing a beat. Deploy half our med teams to surface. Keep trauma centers running. Use drone relays for supply drops. Understood, Albrecht said, already moving dot as the captain turned to resume status checks. Orion's voice cut back in. Captain, receiving an encrypted ping from a long-range relay node. Federation command signature. Vance raised an eyebrow. Patch it. A moment later, a Federation admiral's face appeared, Vice Admiral Shea Uriel, flanked by aides, her expression unreadable. Captain Vance, you violated direct withdrawal protocols. Engaged in unauthorized combat. Entered restricted hyperspace lanes. Executed a banned combat directive without clearance. The temperature on the bridge dropped. Everyone froze dot, then Uriel leaned closer. And you just saved 50,000 lives. Vance blinked. Uriel smiled faintly. Nicely done, Captain. Official censure will be delayed. Consider yourself on extended Black Flag operation status. Meaning? Vance asked. Meaning, you're ghosts again. Unacknowledged. Off the books. You go where the Federation can't, and when you howl next, make it count. The screen cut out. Albrecht walked back onto the bridge, overhearing the last of it. So, we're still rogues, but with a blessing. Not a blessing, Vance said, turning back to the stars. A responsibility. Aboard the Howlstorm, systems slowly began to restore. Lighting brightened. Hull patches. Sealed. Fighters returned. One by one, the crew began to breathe again. Down on the moon, the children of Irias 3 played beside armored soldiers as engineers repaired water lines. A new banner rose beside the crater half-burned, stitched from civilian cloth. It bore a Wolf's silhouette, and a single word beneath it. Remembered that the void between stars fell silent again. But now, the galaxy knew what lurked in it. The silence that followed the Battle of Irias 3 was not peaceful. It was charged. Not the hollow quiet of a devastated colony, but a stillness so complete it felt held as if the universe itself paused to understand what had just happened. 50,000 survivors emerged from bunkers into broken sunlight, blinking up at a sky that had once promised death, but now whispered something else. Human vengeance had come. And the galaxy felt it. Captain Mara Vance stood alone in the Howlstorm's observation deck, a panoramic window curving around her like a crown. From here, she could see the moon's surface dotted with columns of smoke, what remained of the fire set by the Zarketh Dominion. She watched repair crews, hers and the colonists, working side by side to lift wreckage, to bury the dead, to cradle the living. Her reflection stared back from the glass, tired, bruised, older than she'd looked the week before, but behind her eyes, something burned still. They'd won, but it had cost them. Down in the medical bay, 5 of her crew were still fighting for their lives. 12 were already gone. 1 fighter squad never returned. They had names, faces. They had laughed and told bad jokes only a few days ago. Now they were just a row of tags hanging from the Howlstorm's wall of silence. Commander Seth Albrecht entered without announcing himself. He held a datapad in one hand, a long scratch across his face still half bandaged. "We finished surface assistance," he said. "Colony defenses are online. Med teams triaged another 100. Lyra." He paused, glancing at her, wants to record a message. To send off-world. "She says the galaxy should know what happened here." Vance didn't move for a moment. Then quietly, "Let her." Albrecht hesitated. "There's more." Of course there was. A transmission intercepted by our long-range buoy, origin unknown. Encrypted, military grade. We cracked it. He handed her the pad. She scanned it once, then again, then looked up, her jaw tightening. "Is this confirmed?" 3 separate intercepts, same signal pattern, same content. The message was simple. Zarketh Command orders initiate contingency. Exodus protocol. Multiple fleets rerouted from Sector Theta to regroup and retaliate. Target. Human warship designation Howlstorm, retaliation, vengeance. The Dominion hadn't surrendered. They had retreated. Vance handed the datapad back. "They're coming. Not just them," Albrecht added. "Other empires. Cartels. Slaver guilds. You hit them where it hurt, and everyone noticed." Vance turned back to the window, her eyes finding the largest crater on Irias 3, the one left by Zuin's flagship. Somewhere under that scorched earth, Dominion wreckage still smoldered. "We lit a fire. We started a war." "No," Vance said. "They did. We just reminded them what happens when you push people too far." The door slid open again. Orion's voice echoed from every console. "Captain." Incoming visual from Colony Command. "They've assembled the survivors." Vance nodded. She made her way to the bridge, every crew member watching her with a quiet respect that bordered on reverence. She had not only led them into hell, she had brought them out again. Not untouched, but alive. And changed. The main display lit up. Governor Alrindor stood before a gathering of colonists, doctors, engineers, children, and broken soldiers holding one another up. At his side, Lyra held a mic and shaking hands. "Captain Vance," Dor began, voice hoarse, "we've spoken. Of what you did here, of what your ship endured, of the lives you saved. There are no medals that can repay that. Lyra took a step forward. We asked the children what we should call you, she said. They didn't say warrior or soldier. They said. She turned, and behind her, 2 workers pulled a massive sheet from the side of a rebuilt colony. Dome. Painted across it, in crude strokes and charcoal lines, was the image of the Howlstorm flying through fire. Below it, 1 word had been written in bold, Guardian. Vance swallowed hard. Humanity has been quiet for too long. Dor continued. But if the void ever threatens us again, we'll remember this. We'll remember that when no one else answered, you did. A cheer rose, not military, not rehearsed, but raw, real. Grateful. Back on the bridge, Rika Tran whispered to Halle, "Do you think this is over?" "No," Halle said, "but it started something. And that matters." Albrecht stepped beside. "Vance, orders, Captain?" She stared at the stars. No Federation medals. No press releases. No parades. Just rumors of a ship with a name that makes tyrants sweat. A pause. Let's make those rumors louder. The Howlstorm pivoted slowly in orbit, its engines flaring with wounded light. It climbed back toward the dark, toward the void it had emerged from. No announcements, no warnings, just the silent knowledge, shared between those who had seen the beast with their own eyes. If you harm the helpless, if you strike without mercy, if you forget that even the quietest world holds precious lives, then the void will answer. And when it does, the Howlstorm will come howling.